All right, so the question is how to get the lights on the numbers here. So if we look at the image that we're trying to copy, I'm noticing a couple things. Despite this is supposed to be glass, but it's just like a flat black. So we may want to get a flat material for this face. And then of course for the numbers, we want to get this glow. And I think we should do that by adding an area light and copying the numbers. But first, let's get this to be flat black. So I'm going to turn on this glass piece. One thing I can do is I can copy over this back plate with the Braun logo, turn on the glass, and shift right click on this to post that on. Obviously, we've lost the numbers now. You can see here I have rubber ready to go. Again, we want this to be a flat, dark body. So I noticed here, we have rough plastic. I think we can get even darker by applying rubber. If I drag the rubber material over and hold Control, it shouldn't overwrite the label. It's asking if I want a link. I'm going to say no. There you go. It left the label, and that's because I held Control as I applied this. Now, obviously, our numbers went away. So I'm going to duplicate the numbers. So I'm going to right click on this and say duplicate. And I'm simply just going to move this forward until they're visible. And the minute they're visible, I'm just going to leave it there. And I noticed that this is an emissive material, and that's good. That's what we want. But what we want to do here is duplicate it. So again, I'm going to right click and say duplicate. And then this one, I'm just going to float just a little bit in front of the last one. So I'm just moving it a little bit forward. And this one, I want to change to an area light. And this will give it that glow effect. But now I want to also turn it, I want to uncheck the box that says visible to camera. And that will just leave us just with the glow and not with the like bright white numbers. And that's essentially, I think, what I would do to get this close. Of course, the area light can be played with as far as like how bright it is to get the amount of like glow. The position can be played with in terms of like its location by right clicking on here and saying move, depending on where we want the glow to be. I would also argue that like the emissive one, the intensity could probably be turned up um, to sort of like the desired effect. There's definitely like a lot of playing in Keyshot to get what you want. I would also double check this lighting setup and consider revisiting this environment. Um, if I just drag over, like start this again and set this to be 1, the lights that I'm looking at here in this image, I'm looking at this highlight here, the top, and then this front face. So I might just start by adding pins. So we can start by adding a pin on the top. It seems to be catching this back edge. I can add another pin, and it's like catching this edge here. If the placement doesn't work, we need to click the target first, and then click over here to try and get this edge. And then finally add one more and position it on this top front face here. And now it's just a matter of like playing with these intensities. So this front face is the brightest. Let's put it at a 3 and see what happens. This first one that we placed, which one is it? I think it's this one. We can maybe make it slightly bigger and also make this brighter. But it's definitely like playing around with these things to get it to where you want it to be. This is getting pretty bright now. But it's something I would consider. I mean, the environment you have is okay. It's just maybe like a little bit washed out, and I'm noticing there's just like a lot of lights and things going on. So I think it can be simplified slightly. Again, in order to get some of these features a little bit more dialed. And of course, they can always be like repositioned and placed. But yeah, I think the key thing in terms of like the light up numbers is changing this front face to rubber. I think if I double click on this, you can make it the rubber even darker, right? If you want to try and match that image by dragging down the specular. And again, with the light here, it's a matter of playing with this material. So here we have the area light and like the brightness and its position. So now that I've turned this down, turn that rubber specularity down, we may want to make the area light brighter and possibly even reposition it. So dragging it away, it will make that glow bigger. In terms of like getting these like bright spots, that would be splitting the surfaces in SolidWorks and turning the emissivity up for the center portions. The reason these are really bright, it's probably because there's like a light in the center here or something. But I'm not worried to that level of detail. But if you wanted to go there, you could. So yeah, that's would be my approach for this. All right, the question is how to put the threading on here. So for me, this is something that I would do in SolidWorks with a split line. It looks like this is a little bit darker, so it could just be a separate material. So here I'm in SolidWorks. I'm going to hide this piece. Now I want a plane that's perpendicular to the headband. So here we go. And what we can do is we can start to split line along this face, and we'll just do it on a quarter of it and mirror it, like delete and mirror it again. So I'm going to create a sketch on this front face. I'm going to hide, I'm going to actually right click on this and say, or no, I'm going to right click on the wire and just hide it so I can see this entirely. So the threads are essentially like these racetrack shapes. So we can make like a slot here. This one's pretty, this is like the easy one because it's vertical. The harder one is this curve, but again, we only have to do half. So I'm actually just going to use, this is kind of like not great for the Jenga tower, but if it's at the end of the tree, it should be okay. Especially if your proportions dialed in, this is going to be the easiest way to do that. So I'm selecting this edge and putting an offset. I'm selecting this edge and putting a similar offset. Honestly, it could probably even be smaller than this. Let's say 0.01. And this is, yeah, this is your file. So I'm matching exactly this. I'm not sure why that disappeared. It's a little bit weird, but it should be okay. We could also, like, to match the threads, you know, use vertical construction lines here so that this one is the same width. And now here it's just a matter of like sketching in a couple arcs and setting them to be tangent. And this here also tangent. And then just like repeating that all the way down. So I've created a couple, one long one just to like save time, but you can imagine it's the same process. It's creating these arcs. And once they're positioned, you can drag them, right, to where you want. You could maybe try to do like, I guess I didn't try this. You could try to do a circular sketch pattern to save time, but I didn't mess with that. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to treat this like a master sketch lower in the tree. So I'm actually exiting out of it. It's kind of bothering me that I can't see the headband. And I think that's just a bug. SolidWorks does that sometimes. So I'm trying to find it here. Where is it? There it is. Oh, I guess it did hide itself. Or maybe I hit it by accident. And the reason why I'm treating this like a master sketch is, again, I'm going to create a new front plane sketch here. It's because this is all one offset line, and I don't want to trim it in this sketch, so I can always change like the width of the threads. So I'm going to create a new sketch on the front plane. I'm going to select the sketch I just made and say convert entities. And now I can use T for the trim tool, T for trim, and just cut all these out. And actually for this first command, I don't want this one. This is just for the curved loop. And the command here is under features split line. If you can't find it, you can search for it. It's also under surfaces and curves. It's hidden here as well. And while I'm in the sketch, I load it. It's using the current sketch as the split line, and then I can select this to put on the split. And so there we have like some threads. Now the reason we put this other one in a different place is because we have to pattern it all the way along here. So let's try that. I'm going to have to play with this. Right now I'm thinking that a circular pattern should work, provided that we have a central axis for this headband. And if that doesn't, we could maybe try a wrap command. So I'm going to play with this. All right, great. So this worked, and I can walk you through what I did. So I copied over this sketch, loaded a new split line command, and so here's the sketch of the racetrack, and for the face, I selected this here. After that, I went to View, Hide Show, and turned all these on, or Alt-V. But also in this option, you want to turn on temporary axes. And what this does is it puts in these like dotted, dashed blue lines anywhere there's a center of a circle. So an obvious one is the earpiece here. But that gives us the central axis of the headband, which is this one in the middle. And so now that I have this split command here, I can load a circular pattern. For the direction, I select this temporary axis in the middle. There's a bunch in here, it doesn't matter which one you pick. And now for the settings, it defaults to equal spacing, but instead I selected instant spacing. So this allows me to tell the, here, this is more obvious this way, right? This one, it's putting a thread every 3 degrees. And here I can like bump it up to whatever amount that looks visually correct. I'll be honest, I'm not sure why it's putting it on this other side. That's kind of confusing me right now. I don't think it should do that. I feel like there's either a checkbox somewhere or something that I'm missing. But it doesn't matter. It still worked for me. So I think I clicked the green check. And now we can see it's running up here. Obviously, we want it to go to halfway. So we do that by changing the amount of copies. So here's 14. Simply by increasing this number, it adds them all the way up. And again, our goal is really only to get this on a quarter of the headband. Because now what we're going to do is, I think I noticed that you have this positioned well. So I can use the right plane with a cut surface now, looking at where this arrow is pointing to cut away. Whoops, I didn't mean to do that. I can edit this feature. We want it to cut away, so I'm going to flip this. I'm going to right click here and say clear selections. We only want it to cut away at the headband. And then you also have the center headband. We can say cut with surface and flip this, and we only want it to cut the headband. And now we can use those exact same things to mirror. So here we can mirror. We want to do a body mirror and select this body. This mirror face can be the right plane. And then mirror, same thing, we want to use this body to mirror. I should have had merge result checked. I think that's what was missing there around the center plane, merge result. I should have done that for the first one to avoid the seam. But now we have this all the way around. Now last but not least is selecting out these faces, and this might take some time. You can actually try to do this before the circular pattern. Let's try that. So I'm going to right click on this face here, click on the beach ball and change the color. It doesn't matter what the color is, as long as it's different than the background. And if we edit this, I think there should be a checkbox. It doesn't always work, but propagate visual properties. It's kind of a buggy feature in SOLIDWORKS, but yeah, that's unfortunate. That means that's a lot of selecting. So it's like clicking in all of these, but you have to do this so that when it's in KeyShot, you can apply a different material to it. We might be able to, let's see if I can do it to the command. No, I don't think it'll do it. Yeah, it does it to the whole face. Unfortunately, it doesn't do it only to these. I'm going to do an experiment and see if we can get it to mirror, at least with the visual properties. So you only have to do it for a quarter. So I'm just going to do one. Okay, so at least it mirrors over. And that's because this is checked. I think if you did a new command, a new circular pattern, and check the propagate visual properties from the beginning. Let's try that. It might work. Maybe because I tried to add it after the fact. Let's see if that works. Nope. Like I said, it's buggy. But yeah, and then you bring it into KeyShot, and then you can apply different material to that. As far as KeyShot goes, you have a pretty good gradient here. If you want to do your own gradient, if you double click on this and go to labels, here, let me try and add a label. I mean, if you create a label in Photoshop, that's like a gradient from like black to transparent, you can apply it on here and click on this, and it should, labels work with transparency. If not, you can try this opacity one, but the diffuse one should work, especially if it's it should be a PNG. And you could get that to be a gradient, but what you have looks pretty good. All right, there's a question about creating a lip on the tape here, similar to this. And it's actually not too complicated. I would want to put the lip in maybe before this radius. Yeah, so actually I'm going to just drag this down. I was going to say, I don't think that should impact anything. I'm going to suppress that. It looks like maybe this, that's what's going on. Okay, so I'm going to drag this up here. And I'm going to right click on, I'm going to select this face and create a sketch on it. We can do that because it's flat, and I can say Alt-N to make it normal to me. And basically I'm sketching an arc. I want the arc to be coincident to this edge, not the face. Can I select the edge? There's the edge. Control and clicking on this and saying coincident. And then clicking on the edge and here and telling them to be tangent. Now it's weird. It doesn't look like it's on there. It's because I have this feature on to make it run faster. You can see if I hover, I don't know if you can see it like flashing there. I'm not able to get it to stay on. But it's at a part where the circle is like above this straight line, but trust that it's on there. And really it's just a matter of once you have the sketch created, saying extruded boss base. And because it's just a line, it automatically gives us this thin feature. It checks the box for us. I can flip it. We want it to be down and like in the tape body. And I can just make this setting to say like up to surface and click on this back surface here. We want it to merge, but only with this body. And then I can check that result. And there we have just like a little lip coming off. Now the question is, how well will this fillet work? It still works, so I think that's good. But yeah, that's how I would address that. As far as KeyShot goes, looking at this, you're pretty good. I think, is there a texture on this face? It looks like there is. Nice work. That looks really good. I think I would, whoops, I would just double check your lighting. So let's go to this environment here. Yeah, that's pretty good actually. I'm glad that you created, it looks like you modified it with this existing setting. I don't know, I'm always a fan of like starting totally from scratch. Looking at this here, so like clicking on this side face and going one at a time. It's maybe a bit more work, but I think you can get it to be closer. To position it, sometimes you need to click the target. So I don't know if we have it on here. And it's just a matter of looking back and forth between the two. But definitely this first one we put in here, I would, make the radius bigger, make it brighter. Things I'm going to be looking at will be like this dimple. So making sure that maybe this is a bit higher up. And again, if you need to like reposition it, click on this and I don't know, maybe it's even more like here. There we go. That's looking pretty good because now we have a shadow here. So that's literally just dragging this around until I see what it looks like. There you go. That's looking pretty good. And again, maybe even bumping the brightness up more on this one. So that's literally like 2 lights. This one here, I mean, I wonder if we can even just turn this off at this point. But yeah, like looking at this radius here, it looks like it's catching. Honestly, that's just one light, and I positioned it somewhere here. I guess you saw what I did. I was dragging it around. That's what I did to get it closer. But that's maybe all it takes, right? Simple is better. I'm also noticing like this gap here. You can always make some of those changes in key shots. I can like find this back body. At least I think I can. Let me try and click on it to select it. And I can say move, and if I just scooch it back a touch, get that part line to just read a little bit more closer to this. Yeah, it looks like everything's, other than some of, you know, these details in here, everything's looking really good. I mean, I might build these in SolidWorks. It looks like you might want some more lighting on this bottom foot. So let's see what you have going on. Nice, I like the custom environment. I don't know if a pin can work lighting on the underneath part. We can try it. So I can try and add a new pin and like click on the foot. But yeah, that doesn't appear to be working. So what I might do is say like, let me make sure your camera is here. Cool, I'll add another one just so I don't accidentally move that one. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna say edit, add geometry, and for me I'm just gonna add a sphere. And I can drag this down. I can change the size here with the scale. And what I want to do is I want to double click on this and change the material to, I think, let's make it an area light and turn this way down to like 10. Change the color to like a neutral white. And then uncheck the visibility to camera. But I mean, if you, obviously, I guess we don't want it in between the two legs. But what I'm looking at is just that there's a little bit more light cast on these feet. It might take 2 of these spheres. It might take it being like further down and away. That might be the simplest solution. Obviously, it's adding a little bit of a highlight there, which we don't want. So again, it might be like playing with this position. Because I am noticing, actually, that there is a little bit of a highlight here and on this edge. So let's turn this off and see. So yeah, so getting the position of this right, it might give you that highlight where you want it. I think it's just a matter of playing with it. But again, that said, you're pretty close. I think that's the only thing missing lighting wise is the light on that foot, and that's how I would do that. And of course, we talked about the seam in SolidWorks, so that's the other thing I would address. All right, so what you have is looking really good, and it's really close. Just some things I'm noticing, but I can appreciate the challenge of them, is this shadow, particularly right here, it's a little bit washed out here. In playing with the lights, I can appreciate the challenge because you have an angled face here, which is lighter than this face, so you have this shadow down here, and any attempt to create contrast up here kind of knocks this shadow away. So I can understand that challenge. But we can talk about some options. And then the other one is like getting these to glow. But also in playing with these, I realized that like using the area light trick, it tends to then cast a glow onto these front knobs here, but we can play with both of those. So firstly, with this contrast and shadow, a very simple change might be under your main settings here in your environment is just pumping up the contrast. It's kind of like low-hanging fruit, but dialing this number up, you might have to play with the individual lights to get it in, to dial it in, but it will pump up some of these shadows and some of these contrasts. So that's a very like simple thing to do. The other thing that I think you're aware of, because I'm seeing evidence of that in the settings here, but for example, if we want to get, you know, just this part bright and try to avoid this part as much as possible, it's taking one of these circle lights, changing them into a rectangle, and that allows us to change these sizes independent of each other. So like turning this more into a strip than a big circle. The other setting that can be played with here is the fall off. So this like feathers the edge. The bigger the number here, the more blurry this edge gets, similar to what this one looks like. But maybe you're already aware of those two things. As far as these glowing, for me, it would be like organizing all these lights first of all. So just dragging these down. I get this warning message every time it says it. I'm just going to say continue. And find this one. And sometimes I'll group all of these, right click on them and say add to group. Click on model sets, I can say lights. And now I can duplicate these. Now I think I did notice that you have, if I double click on them, whoops, wrong one. You already had an area light loaded in here. Obviously, the area light default is too bright, so I'm going to turn this down. I think it also correctly unchecked visible to camera. So let's see, I'm going to check this, and I'm going to say visible and reflections, I guess. Now I know when it's in like in this pocket here. Here, let's turn off the first set of lights. Oops. It's just like this pure white, and even playing with the color of it. Right, like material, edit material. I couldn't double click on it because it's not visible to camera. I noticed that even playing with this here, it still looks pure white, even if we try and match that. And I think it's the nature of what an area light is like. And so that's why, let's see, can we dial that? What happens if we make this 1? I don't know. Maybe that's the option. I didn't consider making this really, really low. Can we do fractions? I would play with something like that. That might work actually with what we want, because now it's lighting up this back edge. We're still not getting that glow. I mean, the way for to get the glow, I would say, is to move it up. But this is where I realize there's a challenge, because it's going to light the knobs here. So I don't know if it's just like trying to keep it as low as humanly possible, just enough to get a glow. I think you can dial in, I'm going to X out of here. Yeah, you can dial it in with the position tool here. So like 0.5, oops, too much, 0.05. So you can like dial this in incrementally, or 0.01. And maybe that's what I would do. Actually, that's looking pretty close. Now again, you can play with these. If you right click on this and say edit the material, you can like turn it invisible again to the camera, and then combine it with the emissive light to get the color and the effect you want. So I would play with something like that. All right, so yeah, this is looking really good. I like the, I think you have the right materials on here. The reflections look like they're in the right place. Is this the, yeah, okay. Now, it looks like it's cropped really narrow. I don't know if that's on my screen or not, but make sure you leave enough headspace up here and down here. So I'm going to go over to image here. I'm going to, there we go. I don't know what I did. I think I unclicked the aspect ratio and it added more headspace. I think I accidentally clicked it twice. So turn that off so that we have enough on the bottom and the top. Now I notice again, it's like this material that looks too glossy compared to the source image. These look flat. So I'm just going to see if I can just like shift click and right click here. And I'm just going to do that on all of these. I'm just like, I shift clicked on the helmet and I'm just right clicking on all of these shiny faces. Because like it just looks flat to me here. Now I notice you also have like some brush material around the lens here. Honestly, it might even just be on these. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think I would make all of these the same material, just one flat material. As far as the center Vader goes, yeah, nice work. That's pretty good. It might be a matter of playing with the lights. It looks like there's like a dark shadow up here compared to this one. So let's see the environment. Okay. I'm a fan of like keeping it simple, but I mean, it looks like this is working. So I don't know if it would be quite a task to try and find out what's causing this light here. Um, but maybe turning that one down. That's kind of being picky though. I think you're pretty close. It's looking good. All right, we had talked about getting rid of the graininess in the shadows here. And playing with this a bit, I think I found a working solution. I mean, it's better. And I can show you what I did. I think the main key here was in the samples. So a couple things. Firstly, if you need to play with this on your own, when you click on this render screen here, you can click on region render, and I think it starts with a full-size box, and basically you just drag the sliders so you can render one specific area. That way you can test it. Here you can see my render settings. My resolution is actually pretty low, but in options, I bump samples way up. And again, based on some Googling and this experiment, I think this is the key to the solution. I think the default is 64. I just doubled that. So that's the one major change I made to the render settings, other than the region, just to check out one area. As far as, so to see the whole thing again, you just want to go back to output and uncheck region, and now you can see your whole scene. As far as the other things I changed, I double clicked on your material here and I changed it from plastic transparent to just plastic. So I didn't mess with the material library. It's still your same settings. I just changed the type. The other major change I made was to your area light. So I ended up moving it around. You can actually see I rotated it because it looks like you have a cylinder here. But I ended up basically just dragging on these pointers until I was happy with the sort of light that was being cast on these bodies here. I think the reason I ended up rotating it is because I kept dragging it forward to cast light down and onto the faces that we see. And I think I ended up rotating it just so that it wouldn't pop out of the lamp. And obviously, if you need to like pivot to do this positioning, you can. But I ended up, I think, putting this light like way front forward. I also changed the scale. I made it bigger. So I think it was at 1 before. I think I made it, you can see 60% bigger roughly. Now the other change I made to the lights under here is I edited the material, and here are the settings I did. I changed the brightness way down because I moved it forward, I could turn it darker. I think the intensity of the light was causing some of the graininess. I also unchecked visible to camera. I also changed it to an area light. I think it was a point light before. I don't know if that area light versus point light made a difference, but I can show the renderings that I got out of it. So this was the first attempt. Or let's see, was this the first attempt? This was the first one. Here you can still see there's some graininess, but this was the most recent one with all those changes I mentioned. I think this one, the material was still the transparent. You can see there's a bit of graininess here. I turned the background off because I wasn't sure if it was reflecting some of the graininess in the background. I determined that I don't think it is. But yeah, the main difference between these two was the position and brightness of the light. So I think it was your original setting of like 660 lumens. This I knocked it down to 100, but I moved it forward to account for that difference. So I think it's a mixture of the samples, the position of the light, the area light, and knocking down the power of the brightness. I don't know. You can double check. I forget if I changed these settings or not, but this is what I used to create those renders. Yeah. Now, the last thing I would do is like I would fill it out these edges here. I would try and move this, use the move body command in SolidWorks to try and get this to be on the ground. But other than those, I think you're on the right path. All right. Yeah, I mean, I think we talked about some of these changes in CAD, and I think that's going to go a long way, getting this glow in the lid. We can try playing with it now. Let me double click on this. All right, so cloudy plastic. I might try clear and rough, maybe. I would probably go with this setting. There's also, let's see, what happens if we select textured? Yeah, I think that's what I would do. I would do clear textured. We can double click on this and change this color, right, to match the render. It seems to be that's the one we want in order to try and match this. Actually, one trick is if you already have this as your, okay. Yeah, if you're able to load for this backplate image, if you're able to load your lamp here, by double clicking on this, you can actually select the color picker and pick directly from the image to try and get this color to be the same. Now it's not perfect, you can see how dark that is, but now because it's also in the background, we can also just kind of lighten this and click around until it's close. But then of course you can always load this back to the backplate image you had, or maybe figure out where that's located first. So that's what the setting I would use for this. It looks like you've already played with this brightness and have that as an area light. That looks right to me. It's maybe just a bit bright. I don't know. I'm probably fussing, honestly. Yeah, that's definitely too dim at 300. The other thing is this like brass piece is getting washed out, so I might look under metal. I mean, I agree with brass, but I might go with something more rough than shiny. Let me turn this way up. Yeah, just so it maintains some of that color. The reflectiveness is it's making it look too white. Honestly, though, if that doesn't work, the other thing I would try is like literally just trying to apply like a brass color directly to this. So using a plastic instead, because the metal might be too shiny. And here you can play with how reflective it looks by dragging this around. So I actually might recommend that route for this. Again, in terms of like trying to get it to match this color a bit better. You know, maybe it could even go brighter. Which is kind of counterintuitive, right? Because it's like a different material than what it is. But again, we're just trying to match the look and feel. And sometimes it's all about making it look how you want, not necessarily getting the exact material. So sometimes like using a trick like that to match it could work. All right. Yeah, this is looking really good. There's a good start here. Just a couple observations. One, orienting this properly. So I think it's just a matter of rotating this body. So we have some of these looks here. So we can click on that and just like rotate this. I think we talked about this in class, how to solve that, and hopefully that helps you. You might want to take these arcs down a bit in SOLIDWORKS. They're just looking a little bit more dramatic than these ones are. The other thing is the lighting. Like you got really close starting with this default scene and adding these lights. I'm a fan of really starting with just this black background and clicking on lights and going from there and adding as few lights as possible. So like, you know, I would maybe click here and click in the center and see like where that got us. Or maybe starting with the center here, upping this brightness and the radius. Obviously, I know this takes more time. Again, you were able to get really close with just the default, but I think you can get closer this way. If you need to position it, you need to click on this target, and so we can click on this corner here. Right, but already like we're a lot closer here. Obviously, it's still too dark here, so maybe it's this main front light. Sometimes what I'll do is I'll change this to a rectangle, and we can like increase this. Sometimes I'll even drag it within this window to see what's happening. If we need to add another light for this down here, that's a possibility. So I'm going to click on the position tool again. And here I'm just going to open up. Yeah, it looks like we're picking up this back edge. So I think it needs something like that. But yeah, that would be my advice on the lights. Now, is this material here, I noticed it's glass and solid. I think in playing with this, the plastic, under plastic clear and textured, I think this worked a bit better to match. It gave us a bit more of a wall here, which is similar to what's going on here, and we see a little bit more of what's going on the inside. So I might consider that switch as well. And then some of the obvious things like getting in the decal and stuff. You know, that can be done here with labels. Once the label is added in, I believe we looked at this in class, is that you can check the bump map and load the same one, and it should push it in or push it out. So yeah, definitely play with that. All right, yeah, the main difference that I'm catching here is just to the lighting in terms of the render. You know, the material is pretty straightforward. I think it's good. It's I see black paint. Yeah, that works. It looks good. The other option would be like a plastic, hard, and either rough or shiny. But again, the paint looks good. The main thing to the lighting, I'm a fan of starting from scratch. It's a bit more work, but I think you can get it to be exactly what you want. And because of the geometric nature, it should be pretty straightforward. I guess getting this gradient across here, that might be a bit of a trick. But it's a matter of just like clicking the pins and dropping them in different locations. So I'm going to click on this pin and click on this face for that position. You know, maybe it needs to be a bit bigger. All right, I'm trying to like pick up some of the light down here. Of course, it's getting on the left face. So I'm just going to drag it over to the side a bit and say done for that one. This one, again, looking back on this, maybe it's here. And if we want to try and get that gradient, we can try going for a rectangle, like rotating the angle, playing with the size and also with the fall off. This will, of course, blur the edges. Maybe with this brightness. It might also be a material thing. Although paint, I feel like, should be a good one for getting a gradient. But yeah, those are like the settings I would play with for this. Obviously, this is getting a little bit too bright now. Let's try positioning this again. Yes, yeah, that's pretty bright. I don't know. I think if there's also a radius here, like positioning this right on this corner, if there's like a bigger fillet to select, it might get us a bit of a gradient on there. And then as far as like these other ones goes, like it really could just be adding a pin light for each of these. And just dialing in the brightness to like what you want it to be. So here, this would be darker for this back face. Or maybe even we want to position this on here. Let's add another one down here. But again, get the brightness way down. But just trying to like match each of these faces and what we want them to be. So here, maybe this is actually brighter. I mean, another natural way to do this one would be to drag this back over so that it bleeds a little bit onto this back face. But this is the method that I would use to get all of these in order. There we go. I think that's pretty close, right? Thinking like the brightest face, the darkest face, and like trying to fill these in. Again, this gradient's going to be the trickiest part. I wonder if playing with the material will help. Whoops, dragging all of the shiny. Oops, I accidentally moved a light. I forgot to click done there. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's just like making this really narrow. There you go. We're starting to get a bit of a gradient now, just not the way we want it. I mean, yeah, gradients are a pain, and like, I guess rotating this seems to be helping. There we go. I'm literally just playing, like, I don't, right? I'm just rotating this angle until the gradient looks like it's going the direction I want it to go. We kind of want this, but the opposite. So maybe it's just dragging this around. There we go, something like that. So yeah, that's shiny black plastic. But again, it should work with paint. And obviously, like, now we need to play with all these other lights, right? To get, just dragging that to the right seems to brighten this one up a bit. But that's how I'd approach the lighting to this model.